Hey everyone, welcome back to Scripture Study with Smithy. So the other day, the other day I was reading in Acts, and I came across this this verse here, where it says, chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, 1, 2, and 3. Sorry. Now about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church. Talking about certain of the church at Jerusalem, right? And he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. So it was the feast time. So I read that and I thought, that's a pretty nasty way to end an apostle's life, with the sword. And it pleased the Jews, right, that they killed him. Anyway, so I looked up a bit more just to make sure I was on the right track. This is actually James the Apostle, and it says I did a bit of research, and I think it's Copilot, the AI app or whatever it is, kind of helped me find it, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, it says James was the son of Zebedee and Salome, born into the family of Jewish fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. His mother, Salome, was a sister of Mary, the mother of Jesus, making James a cousin of Jesus. And when I read that, I thought, I remember learning about that a long time ago. I just forgot. Right? It kind of gives you a different perspective on why Jesus took James and John and Peter, those three, with him onto the Mount Transfiguration, into the Garden of Gethsemane. There's a few other times when they were kind of alone doing stuff outside of the other apostles. So kind of it's interesting. And John is described as the one that Jesus loved, and the one that was on Jesus' bosom and that kind of thing. Interesting, because they're cousins. Why wouldn't he love them? Part of the family. Did he know them? Would he have known them before he called them out of the sea? Yeah, he would have. Yeah. So James worked alongside his brother and father as a fisherman before being called by Jesus to follow him, leaving their livelihood immediately to embrace discipleship. Why do you think they followed him? Because they already knew that there was something special about him, right? Because they would have heard all the stories in the family about the things he did growing up, the things he taught when he was 12 in the temple, any miracles. In the Gnostic Gospels, there's a few instances in there where it talks about things that Jesus did as an infant. I'm not sure if they're true or verifiable. That's why they're in the Gnostic Gospels and not the canon. But if it's true, obviously Jesus would have had abilities to do things when he was a child, and he had a greater understanding than a lot of people, the wise people of his time. So he would have they said things, and he would have done things that would have impressed upon a lot of people. And so, when it just gives another perspective to when he's walking along by the seashore and he calls these guys out, says, "Come follow me," and they immediately come because they had already known about him, heard these stories. And obviously John the Baptist, had said, here he is, this is the Christ, so follow him. Anyway, apostolic ministry. Okay, where was I? So James, along with his brother John and Peter, formed the inner circle of disciples who were present at key events in Jesus' ministry. These included the raising of Jairus' daughter, the Transfiguration, and Jesus' agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus nicknamed James and John Boanerges, or Sons of Thunder. That's how I've always remembered them, the Sons of Thunder. Oh. reflecting their zealous and sometimes impulsive nature. This nickname became evident when they suggested calling down fire from heaven on a village that rejected Jesus, though over time James learned to temper his zeal with compassion. So I remember reading about that they're like, just call down fire upon this village that, is rejecting you. And Jesus is like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Anyway, martyrdom. James was the first apostle to be martyred, executed by King Herod Agrippa I in Jerusalem around 44 AD. His death is recorded in the book of Acts, and tradition holds that he faced martyrdom with courage and steadfast faith, refusing to renounce his beliefs despite the threat of death. I read somewhere else, well, they killed him with the sword, but I read somewhere else where they basically chopped his head off. I'm not sure if that's accurate, like these are just traditions that people have carried on. Who knows, it was around 44 AD, so it's a long time ago. Legacy. James is often referred to as James the Greater, to distinguish him from the other apostles named James, such as James the Less. He is remembered for his close relationship with Jesus, his role in the inner circle of apostles, and his unwavering commitment to the Christian faith, which ultimately led to his martyrdom. His life exemplifies dedication, courage, and the transformative power of discipleship. So I thought, let's do a little tribute to James the apostle, the first apostle that was martyred in AD 44. So Stephen was obviously martyred first, and then it was later that James was. And interesting timing, because we know that Paul was called to the apostleship. We don't know, but was Paul, this is a good question, was Paul called to the 12 as a replacement to James? Or was Barnabas called to the 12 as a replacement to James, because he was also described as an apostle? So, and Barnabas was around a little bit before Paul, so who knows? We're not quite sure. There's not enough information on that. Anyway, doesn't really matter, but we know that there is an order in the 12, and when Judas was killed, or killed himself, that Matthias was chosen, and it said there had to be someone that had been there from the beginning, who had seen the miracles and knew about Jesus, right? Well, Paul kind of is outside that box because he's a convert, right? But he had his own vision where he saw the Lord. So he kind of fits that mold, that they were looking for someone to fill the 12 who had a testimony of Jesus Christ, who had a powerful witness who could testify of Jesus Christ as they went through the world. And obviously James did that, and he was preaching in Jerusalem, and the Jews didn't like it, and that's why they killed him. Anyway, we're going to do another video about what happened, because it is interesting what happens to Peter, because Peter got rounded up and put in prison, and they were going to wait till the end of the feast time before they did something about it, because they didn't want to do it during the feast. Anyway, that's another video. But anyway, this is just a tribute to James, to remember these guys. Like I did a video on Stephen. I've done a video on Barnabas, and this one's a special one for Stephen, just a shout out to say, good work, good stuff, good example to us all to be obedient and follow Jesus, preach the gospel, and stand strong in the face of opposition and persecution, even if it leads to an untimely end. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of that. See you next time.